The crack of a rifle shattered the dawn silence as Violet Chambers stumbled forward, her hand instinctively clutching her side, where blood now seeped through her once pristine blue dress. She had been so close, so desperately close to reaching the safety of Sheridan, Wyoming, when the outlaws who had pursued her for 3 days finally landed their mark. In the spring of 1875, the Wyoming Territory was still wild and untamed, a place where justice was often delivered by the barrel of a gun rather than the gavel of a judge. Violet had never imagined she would find herself caught in such danger. Just 22 years old, she had come west from Boston following her father's death, hoping to claim the modest inheritance he had left her, a small plot of land outside Sheridan. What she hadn't known was that her father's land had become valuable, very valuable. The Northern Pacific Railroad was planning to lay tracks through the region, and certain men were willing to kill to control the parcels in its path. Men like Silas Thornton, who had made her an offer for her land that morning in Sheridan, an offer that quickly turned to threats when she refused. Now she was paying the price for her stubbornness. Violet pressed on, each step growing heavier as she lost more blood. The mountains loomed before her, promising safety if she could just reach the town on the other side. But her vision was beginning to blur, her legs weakening beneath her. "Just a little farther," she whispered to herself, her voice lost in the vast emptiness of the Wyoming wilderness. Another shot rang out, kicking up dirt mere inches from her feet. The outlaws were closing in. As darkness began to creep in at the edges of her vision, Violet caught sight of movement ahead, a rider on horseback, emerging from the tree line. For a terrible moment, she feared it was another of Thornton's men. But as the figure drew closer, she saw he wasn't riding with the others. He was alone. The last thing Violet remembered before collapsing was the sight of a man in a worn leather duster and wide-brimmed hat, his face partially obscured as he dismounted and rushed toward her. Hunter Hayes had been tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on his cattle when he heard the gunshots. At 30 years old, he had spent most of his life in Wyoming, having come west with his parents as a boy. He'd buried them both on his ranch 5 miles outside of Sheridan, victims of a harsh winter fever 3 years prior. He'd lived alone since then, speaking more to his horses and cattle than to any human being. The solitude suited him just fine, or so he told himself. When he saw the woman stumble and fall, blood staining her dress, something long dormant awakened in him. Without hesitation, he was off his horse and kneeling beside her. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Hunter gently turned her over, noting the wound at her side. It was bleeding steadily, but didn't appear to have hit anything vital. Still, she needed medical attention, and quickly. The sound of approaching horses made Hunter's decision for him. Whoever had shot this woman was coming to finish the job. He could see them now, 4 riders, still a ways off but closing fast. "Hold on, madam," he murmured, carefully lifting her slight form. She moaned softly but didn't regain consciousness as he placed her on his horse, then mounted behind her, supporting her limp body against his chest. Hunter spurred his horse toward Sheridan. The town was 10 miles away, too far for a wounded woman, but he had no choice. Behind them, the riders had spotted him and were now in pursuit, their shouts carrying on the wind. "Come on, Samson," Hunter urged his horse, feeling the woman's blood soaking into his shirt. He knew these lands better than most had to, as a rancher, and veered off the main trail into a thickly wooded ravine where the horsemen would have trouble following. The woman stirred against him, her eyelids fluttering. Who are you?" she managed, her voice barely audible over the pounding of hooves. "Name's Hunter Hayes. Don't worry, I'm taking you to town. Doctor'll fix you up." "They'll kill me," she whispered. "Thornton's men." Hunter's jaw tightened. Silas Thornton was well known in these parts, a wealthy landowner with political aspirations and a ruthless reputation. If Thornton wanted this woman dead, she was in more trouble than just the bullet wound. "They'll have to get through me first," Hunter replied, surprising himself with the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "What's your name, madam?" "Violet Chambers." She grimaced in pain. "My father's land, they want it." Hunter nodded grimly. The railroad was coming through, and land prices were soaring. He'd heard rumors of forced sales and mysterious accidents befalling stubborn landowners. "Save your strength, Miss Chambers. Sheridan's still a ways off." They rode hard for an hour, the sound of pursuit fading behind them as Hunter navigated trails only locals knew. But Violet's condition was worsening. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor and her breathing had grown shallow. When they reached a clearing by a creek, Hunter knew he had to stop. She wouldn't make it to town without attention to her wound. He carefully dismounted, lifting Violet down and laying her on a patch of soft grass. "Miss Chambers, I need to look at that wound." She nodded weakly, her eyes glazed with pain. Hunter gently moved her hand aside and tore the fabric of her dress where the bullet had entered. The wound was still bleeding, though not as heavily as before. "I need to clean this and stop the bleeding," he explained, removing his bandana and soaking it in the cool creek water. "This might hurt." Violet bit her lip as he carefully cleaned around the wound. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the pain. Hunter shook his head. "Just a rancher. But you spend enough time with livestock, you learn a thing or two about patching up wounds." "Comforting," she murmured, a ghost of a smile touching her lips despite her condition. He found himself smiling back. "I promise not to confuse you with one of my heifers." After cleaning the wound, Hunter retrieved a small flask from his saddlebag. "This is going to sting something fierce," he warned her. Violet nodded, bracing herself. When the whiskey hit her wound, she cried out, her back arching in pain. Hunter held her steady with a gentle but firm hand. "Almost done," he assured her. He then took a clean shirt from his saddlebag, tore it into strips, and carefully bound her wound. "We've got another 9 miles to Sheridan," he told her, checking the position of the sun. "It'll be dark soon. Thornton's men will be looking for us on the main roads." "We can't stay here," Violet said, struggling to sit up. "If they find us, easy," Hunter steadied her. "You're in no condition to ride hard and we can't risk the main trail. There's a line shack about 2 miles from here. We can shelter there for the night and head to town at first light." Violet wanted to protest, but was too weak. She knew he was right. She could feel herself fading. The bullet might not have hit any vital organs, but she'd lost a lot of blood, and the pain was overwhelming. Hunter carefully lifted her back onto his horse. This time, he positioned her in front of him, his arms encircling her to keep her steady as he held the reins. Violet found herself leaning back against his solid chest, drawing strength from his presence. They rode slowly through the gathering dusk, Hunter constantly alert for signs of pursuit. The line shack appeared just as the last light was fading from the sky, a simple one-room structure built by cattlemen for use during long drives. Hunter carried Violet inside, laying her gently on the narrow cot while he lit a lantern. The shack was sparse but clean, with a small wood stove, a rough-hewn table with one chair, and a few basic supplies on a shelf. "It's not much, but it'll keep us warm and dry," he said, moving to start a fire in the stove. Violet watched him work, finding comfort in his efficient movements. There was something about this quiet rancher that made her feel safe, despite the danger they were in. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You don't know me. Thornton is powerful in these parts. You're risking a lot." Hunter paused, seeming to consider her question carefully. My pa taught me that a man who stands by while others suffer isn't much of a man at all. He added kindling to the small flame he'd started. Besides, I've never much cared for bullies, especially ones that shoot women in the back. As the shack warmed, Hunter checked Violet's bandages and helped her sip water from his canteen. Her fever was beginning to rise, a bad sign. Try to rest, he told her, covering her with his duster. We'll head to town at first light. Violet closed her eyes, drifting into a fitful sleep, while Hunter kept watch by the small window, his rifle across his knees. Outside, the Wyoming wilderness was alive with night sounds, but Hunter was listening for the approach of men. Several times during the night, Violet woke, delirious with fever, calling out about her father and the land. Hunter would dampen a cloth with cool water from his canteen and place it on her forehead, speaking softly until she calmed. During one such moment, as dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky, Violet gripped his hand with surprising strength. "My father's letter," she said urgently. "In my boot." The deed Hunter gently removed her right boot and found a folded, sealed envelope tucked inside. He didn't open it, simply showed it to her and then placed it securely in his own jacket pocket. "It's safe," he assured her. "Now rest. We'll be moving soon." But as the first rays of sun broke over the mountains, Hunter knew they had a problem. Violet's fever had worsened, and she was too weak to sit a horse. The 9 miles to Sheridan might as well have been 100. He had two choices: try to ride for help, leaving Violet alone and vulnerable, or carry her to Sheridan himself. One look at her pale face made the decision for him. Hunter gathered what supplies he could, made sure his rifle was loaded, and carefully lifted Violet into his arms. She was light, too light, and burning with fever. "What are you doing?" she murmured, her eyes fluttering open. "Getting you to town," he replied simply. "Hold on to me if you can." And so Hunter Hayes began walking toward Sheridan, carrying Violet Chambers in his arms. He knew the journey would take all day at best, but he saw no alternative. The main trail was too dangerous, with Thornton's men likely still searching, but there was a route through the foothills that, while longer, would keep them hidden. The morning air was cool as Hunter set out, establishing a steady pace. Violet drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes talking about Boston, sometimes about her father, occasionally lucid enough to apologize for being a burden. "You're not a burden, Miss Chambers," Hunter told her during one such moment. "Just a person who needs help. We all need that sometimes." By midday, the spring sun was high and hot. Hunter's arms and back ached from carrying Violet, but he pressed on, stopping only briefly to drink from his canteen and help Violet do the same. Her fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't worsened either. "You should leave me," she said during one rest. "Save yourself," Hunter shook his head. "That's not going to happen. My mother would rise from her grave and haunt me for the rest of my days." Violet managed a weak smile. "She raised a good man." "She tried her best," Hunter replied, his voice softening at the memory of his mother. "Rest now. We've still got a ways to go." As the afternoon wore on, the terrain grew more challenging. Hunter's boots slipped on loose shale as he navigated a steep descent, carefully shielding Violet from the impact. His muscles screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other. 6 miles from Sheridan, disaster struck. As Hunter rounded a bend in the trail, he came face to face with 2 of Thornton's men, resting their horses by a small spring. They reacted instantly, reaching for their guns. Hunter had no choice but to run, ducking into the thick underbrush with Violet clutched tightly against him. Bullets whizzed past them as he scrambled up a rocky slope, seeking cover behind a fallen tree. "Stay down," he whispered to Violet, carefully setting her behind the log. He drew his revolver, waiting as the men crashed through the brush below. "Come on out, mister," one of them called. "We just want the woman. You can ride away from this." Hunter remained silent, calculating his odds. 2 against 1, and he had Violet to protect. Not good. Last chance, the outlaw shouted. "Thornton's paying good money for that deed she's carrying." When Hunter didn't respond, the men began to advance, spreading out to flank his position. He waited until the first man came into view, then fired, hitting him in the shoulder. The outlaw fell with a cry of pain. The second man returned fire, forcing Hunter to duck down. Bullets splintered the log above Violet's head. "Stay here," Hunter told her, before rolling to a new position and firing twice more. The second outlaw dropped, clutching his leg. Hunter quickly moved forward, kicking their weapons away. "You tell Thornton that Violet Chambers is under my protection now," he said, his voice cold. "Come after her again and you won't be riding away." The men glowered but said nothing as Hunter backed away, returning to Violet. She was conscious, watching him with wide eyes. "You could have been killed," she whispered as he lifted her again. "So could you," he replied. "Let's get moving before more of them show up." They continued their journey, Hunter now moving with greater urgency. The encounter had cost them valuable time, and Violet's condition was deteriorating. Her skin was hot to the touch, her breathing increasingly labored. The sun was beginning to set when they reached a ridge overlooking Sheridan. The small frontier town lay in the valley below, its buildings glowing golden in the fading light. They had made it almost. "Look," Hunter said, adjusting Violet in his arms so she could see. "Sheridan, we're almost there." Violet stirred, her eyes focusing briefly on the town below. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Just a little farther," Hunter encouraged, beginning the descent into the valley, but the final miles proved the hardest. Hunter's legs trembled with exhaustion, each step an act of will. Violet had fallen unconscious again, her body limp in his arms. The night had fully fallen by the time they reached the outskirts of town, the windows of Sheridan glowing with lamplight. "Help," Hunter called as he staggered into the main street. "I need a doctor." People emerged from the saloon and hotel, expressions of shock on their faces as they took in the sight of the blood-soaked rancher carrying the unconscious woman. "Thornton's men shot her," Hunter explained as several townspeople rushed forward. "She needs help." Doc Wilson, the town's physician, quickly took charge, directing Hunter to bring Violet to his office. As Hunter laid her gently on the examination table, the doctor began cutting away the bloodied bandages. "You've done well keeping this clean," Doc Wilson remarked, examining the wound. "But she's lost a lot of blood and there's infection setting in." "When was she shot?" "Yesterday morning," Hunter replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I found her about 10 miles out of town." The doctor looked up sharply. "You carried her 10 miles." "The last 10, Hunter corrected, swaying slightly on his feet. "We rode part way, then had to hide from Thornton's men. Couldn't risk the main trail." Sheriff Thomas Gibson had entered the doctor's office, his weathered face grim. "Thornton's involved in this." Hunter nodded, briefly explaining about Violet's land and the deed she carried. He produced the envelope from his pocket, handing it to the sheriff. "She said this proves the land is hers. Thornton wants it because of the railroad coming through." Gibson examined the sealed letter. "I'll keep this safe until she can claim it. In the meantime, I'll have a talk with Mr. Thornton about shooting innocent women." "It won't be easy to prove," Hunter warned. "His men did the actual shooting." "Still, attempted murder's a serious charge," Gibson replied. "And I've been looking for a reason to rein Thornton in for some time now." Doc Wilson had finished his initial examination of Violet. "I need to operate to remove the bullet and clean the wound properly. You should wait outside, Mr. Hayes." Hunter hesitated, reluctant to leave Violet's side after everything they'd been through. The doctor's expression softened. "I'll take good care of her. You look dead on your feet yourself. When's the last time you ate or slept?" Hunter couldn't remember. The past 36 hours had been a blur of danger and determination. "Go to the hotel," Gibson suggested. "Get some food and rest. I'll post a deputy here to make sure nobody bothers the lady." Hunter finally agreed, giving Violet's hand one last squeeze before leaving. As he stepped outside, the full weight of his exhaustion hit him. His legs nearly gave out and he had to lean against the building for support. Martha Erickson, the owner of the hotel across the street, hurried over to assist him. "Come along, Mr. Hayes," she said kindly. "You've done enough heroics for one day." Hunter allowed himself to be led to the hotel, where Martha provided him with a hot meal and a room. He barely finished eating before collapsing onto the bed, still fully clothed, and falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. He awoke disoriented the next morning, momentarily forgetting where he was. Then the events of the previous days came flooding back, and he bolted upright. "Violet," he muttered, rushing to wash his face and straighten his disheveled appearance before hurrying back to the doctor's office. He found Doc Wilson drinking coffee at his desk, looking tired but satisfied. "How is she?" Hunter demanded without preamble. "Alive, thanks to you," the doctor replied. "The surgery went well. I removed the bullet and cleaned the wound thoroughly. Her fever broke around dawn. She's young and strong. I expect she'll make a full recovery, though it'll take time." Relief flooded through Hunter. "Can I see her?" Doc Wilson nodded, leading him to a small recovery room at the back of his office. Violet lay sleeping, her face peaceful despite the ordeal she'd been through. Her skin, though pale, had lost the alarming gray tinge of the previous day. Hunter took a seat beside her bed, content to simply watch the gentle rise and fall of her chest, proof that she was indeed going to be all right. It was nearly noon when Violet finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. She looked confused for a moment, then her gaze settled on Hunter and recognition dawned. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "Course I am," Hunter replied, moving closer. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot," she said with a faint smile, "but alive thanks to you." Hunter shook his head. "I just carried you. Doc Wilson did the hard part." "You saved my life," Violet insisted. "I would have died out there if you hadn't found me." She paused, studying his face. "Why did you do it?" "Carry me all that way?" Hunter considered her question, searching for the right words. "I couldn't leave you," he finally said simply. "It wasn't even a choice." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection neither of them had anticipated. Violet reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to," Hunter assured her. "Just get better." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Gibson, who was pleased to see Violet awake. He returned her father's letter and explained that he'd confronted Silas Thornton with the evidence of his men's attack on her. "He denied ordering them to shoot you, of course," Gibson told her. "Claims they were just supposed to scare you into selling. But I've got them locked up and they're starting to turn on each other. Thornton's influence in this town is waning." "What about my father's land?" Violet asked anxiously. "It's yours, according to the deed," Gibson assured her. "Thornton has no legal claim to it. Once you're recovered, we can go to the land office and make sure everything's properly recorded." After the sheriff left, Doc Wilson came to check on his patient, declaring that she was recovering remarkably well but would need to stay in his care for at least another week. "After that, you'll need somewhere quiet to continue recovering," the doctor advised. "No traveling for at least a month." Violet's face fell. "I don't have anywhere to stay," she admitted. I only just arrived in Sheridan when Thornton approached me. I hadn't even had time to visit my father's property. You can stay at my ranch, Hunter offered before he could stop himself. It's peaceful there, good place to recover. Both Violet and the doctor looked at him in surprise. That's very generous, Mr. Hayes, Doc Wilson said, but perhaps not entirely proper for a single lady. My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, lives there too, Hunter quickly explained. She's been with my family for years. Miss Chambers would have all the proper chaperoning and care she needs. Violet studied him thoughtfully. You've already done so much for me. It's no trouble, Hunter insisted. The ranch house has plenty of room and it's safer than staying in town with Thornton still around. After some consideration, Violet accepted his offer, much to Hunter's private relief. The idea of her leaving Sheridan once she recovered had created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. Over the next week, Hunter visited Violet daily, bringing her books from the general store and news from around town. He learned that she had been raised in Boston by her father after her mother died in childbirth. Her father, Joseph Chambers, had invested in Wyoming land years earlier, but had never actually moved west himself. He always talked about coming here someday, Violet explained. Said there was freedom in the West that the East had lost. When he died, I discovered he'd left me the land. It felt like he was giving me a chance at a new beginning. Hunter told her about his own life coming west with his parents as a boy, learning to ranch, losing them to fever, and the solitary existence he'd led since. It gets lonely sometimes, he admitted one afternoon. But I've got the horses and cattle for company, and Mrs. Winters keeps me fed and makes sure I remember my manners. She sounds wonderful, Violet said, smiling. I look forward to meeting her. By the end of the week, Doc Wilson declared Violet well enough to leave his care, though she would need to continue resting and allow her wound time to fully heal. Hunter arranged for a wagon with a comfortable mattress in the back to transport her to his ranch. The journey took just over an hour, with Hunter driving carefully to avoid jostling his passenger. As they approached the ranch, Violet propped herself up to get a better view. Hunter's property sat in a picturesque valley, sheltered by rolling hills. The ranch house was larger than Violet had expected, a well-maintained two-story structure with a broad porch. Several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn completed the settlement. Cattle grazed on the surrounding pastures, and horses watched curiously as the wagon approached. It's beautiful, Violet said sincerely. Hunter glanced at her, pleased by her reaction. It's home, he replied simply. Mrs. Winters, a stout woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and kind eyes, was waiting on the porch as they arrived. She hurried down to help as Hunter carefully lifted Violet from the wagon. So this is the young lady you've been fussing about, Mrs. Winters said, giving Violet a warm smile. Welcome to the Hayes Ranch, Miss Chambers. We've got the blue room all ready for you. Violet was installed in a comfortable bedroom on the first floor, with windows that looked out over a small garden. Mrs. Winters proved to be both an excellent cook and a motherly presence, making Violet feel welcome while respecting her need for rest. As the days passed, Violet gradually regained her strength. She began with short walks in the garden, then progressed to sitting on the porch, watching the daily activities of the ranch. Hunter would often join her in the evenings, and they would talk until the sun set behind the mountains. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Violet asked about her father's land. Have you seen it? Is it far from here? Hunter nodded. It's about 3 miles east, closer to town. Good land, has a small creek running through it, plenty of grass. The cabin's old but solid. Your father chose well. Would you take me there? When I'm strong enough, of course, Hunter agreed. Maybe next week if Doc Wilson says it's all right. True to his word, when Doc Wilson visited the following week and pronounced Violet's recovery progressing nicely, Hunter arranged for a gentle ride to her property. He helped her mount a docile mare named Daisy, staying close beside her as they rode at a leisurely pace. The late spring day was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze and wildflowers dotting the prairie. Violet reveled in her first real outing since the shooting, color returning to her cheeks as they rode. When they crested a small rise, Hunter reined in his horse. "There it is," he said, pointing to a tract of land below them. "Your father's property, your property now." Violet gazed at the land that had nearly cost her life. It was indeed beautiful, a sweep of green grass, a sparkling creek, a small stand of cottonwoods, and a sturdy log cabin. In the distance, mountains rose against the blue sky. "It's perfect," she whispered, unexpectedly moved by the sight. This was what her father had wanted for her, a place of her own in this magnificent country. They rode down to the cabin, and Hunter helped Violet dismount. The cabin was basic but sound, with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom, and simple furnishings covered in dust cloths. "It needs some fixing up," Hunter observed, checking the roof for leaks, "but nothing major. It's a good place." Violet stood in the center of the main room, trying to imagine living here. It would be a far cry from her life in Boston, but there was something appealing about the simplicity and independence it offered. "What will you do with it?" Hunter asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. He'd grown accustomed to Violet's presence at the ranch, and the thought of her leaving either to live here alone or return east left him feeling unsettled. "I don't know yet," Violet admitted. "I came west to start a new life, but I never really thought beyond claiming the land." They spent an hour exploring the property before Violet tired and they headed back to the ranch. That night at dinner, Violet was unusually quiet, lost in thought about her future. The following morning, Sheriff Gibson rode out to the ranch with news. Thornton's men had confessed that their boss had indeed ordered them to retrieve the deed from Violet by any means necessary. Thornton had been arrested and was awaiting trial. "The judge arrives next week," Gibson informed them. "You'll need to testify, Miss Chambers, if you're well enough." The prospect of facing Thornton in court was daunting, but Violet agreed. "I'll be there," she promised. "He needs to answer for what he did." After the sheriff departed, Violet found Hunter in the barn brushing down his horse. "I'm nervous about the trial," she confessed. "What if Thornton's influence is still strong enough to sway the judge?" Hunter set down the brush and turned to her. "Judge Parker is known for his fairness, and the whole town's heard what happened to you. Thornton won't escape justice this time." Violet nodded, wanting to believe him. "Will you come with me?" "To the trial?" "You couldn't keep me away," Hunter assured her, his hand briefly covering hers where it rested on the stall door. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through Violet. Over the weeks of her recovery, her feelings toward Hunter had evolved from gratitude to genuine affection. His quiet strength, kindness, and unwavering support had become precious to her, though she hadn't yet found the courage to express these feelings. What she didn't know was that Hunter was experiencing a similar internal struggle. The solitary rancher had never expected to feel so strongly about anyone, let alone a city woman from Boston who had literally fallen into his life. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, missing her when he was out working the ranch, and wondering what would happen once she was fully recovered. The day of the trial arrived, and Violet dressed carefully in a new dress that Mrs. Winters had helped her alter. Her side still ached occasionally, a reminder of how close she had come to death, but she was determined to see justice done. Hunter drove her to town in his wagon, his protective presence beside her a comfort as they entered the crowded courthouse. Silas Thornton sat at the defendant's table, his once imperious demeanor now subdued. He avoided looking at Violet as she took her seat. When called to testify, Violet told her story clearly and truthfully, from Thornton's initial threats to the terrifying pursuit and shooting. Hunter also testified, describing how he'd found her wounded and the subsequent chase by Thornton's men. Judge Parker listened attentively, his stern expression giving nothing away. When all testimony had been heard, he delivered his verdict without hesitation: guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy. Thornton was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. As Thornton was led away in shackles, he finally looked at Violet, his eyes burning with hatred. "You'll regret this," he spat. "That land will never bring you happiness." Hunter stepped protectively in front of Violet, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm, but the deputies quickly removed Thornton from the courtroom. "It's over," Violet said softly, placing her hand on Hunter's arm. "He can't hurt us now." Hunter nodded, but something in Thornton's threat had unsettled him. "Let's get back to the ranch," he suggested. "Mrs. Winters is making a special dinner to celebrate." The ride back was quiet, both of them processing the events of the day. As they approached the ranch, the setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, highlighting the beauty of the place Hunter called home. "I've been thinking," Violet said suddenly, breaking the silence, "about my father's land." Hunter's hands tightened on the reins, preparing himself for her decision to leave. "Oh, the railroad will want to buy part of it for the tracks," she continued. "That would give me enough money to really develop the rest of the property. Maybe raise some cattle, plant a garden." Hunter glanced at her, surprised. "You're planning to stay in Wyoming then, not return to Boston?" Violet shook her head. "There's nothing for me in Boston anymore. My home is here now." She paused, gathering her courage. "At least I'd like it to be." The wagon pulled up in front of the ranch house, and Hunter set the brake before turning to face her fully. "Violet," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "these past weeks, having you here, it's like the house has come alive again. I know you have your own land now, your own plans, but I was hoping, I wondered if I might consider staying." Violet finished for him, her heart racing. Hunter nodded, his expression earnest. "Not just as a guest, as more than that, much more." Violet's eyes widened as she understood what he was trying to say. "Hunter Hayes, are you asking me to marry you?" "I reckon I am," he admitted, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Doing a poor job of it, too. But yes, that's what I'm asking. I know it's sudden and we haven't known each other long, but I can't imagine my life without you in it now." Tears welled in Violet's eyes. "It's not too sudden," she whispered. "Not when I feel the same way." Hunter's hand gently cupped her cheek. "Is that a yes, then?" "Yes," Violet replied without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their first kiss was tender, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "What about your father's land?" Hunter asked, suddenly remembering. "We could join the properties," Violet suggested. "Make a larger ranch, or keep it as a place for our children someday." Hunter's heart swelled at the mention of children, their children. "I like the sound of that," he said softly. Mrs. Winters, who had been watching from the porch, wiped a tear from her eye before bustling back inside to give them privacy. She'd known from the moment Hunter had brought the injured young woman home that something special was happening, and she couldn't be happier for the man she'd watched grow from a boy. The following Sunday, Hunter and Violet announced their engagement to the congregation at Sheridan's small church. The town, which had followed their story with interest since the dramatic night Hunter had carried Violet into town, responded with enthusiastic congratulations. As spring turned to summer, preparations for their wedding occupied much of their time. Violet's strength returned fully, and she began to take an active role in the ranch operations, proving to be a quick learner and determined helper. Hunter, for his part, spent several days at her property, repairing the cabin and clearing the land around it. They were married on a perfect July day, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. The ceremony was held outdoors, under an arch of wildflowers, with mountains as their backdrop. Violet wore a simple white dress with a crown of prairie flowers in her hair, and Hunter looked uncommonly handsome in a new suit. Sheriff Gibson gave the bride away, and Mrs. Winters wept happily throughout the ceremony. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Hunter kissed his bride with a tenderness that moved even the most stoic ranchers present. The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the couple who had overcome such extraordinary circumstances to find each other. When they finally returned to the ranch, their ranch now, Hunter carried Violet over the threshold, both of them laughing at the memory of their first journey together. "This is a much happier carrying than the last time," Violet teased as he set her down in their bedroom. Hunter drew her close, his expression growing serious. "I never thought I'd be grateful for you getting shot, but if it hadn't happened, we might never have met." Violet stretched up to kiss him. "Some things are meant to be, no matter how they begin." Summer turned to fall, and the Hayes Ranch flourished under their joint care. The railroad purchased a strip of Violet's land for a handsome sum, allowing them to expand their cattle operation and hire additional hands. The cabin on Violet's property was fully restored and became a favorite retreat for the couple when they wanted time alone together. In October, Violet discovered she was expecting their first child. Hunter's reaction was one of pure joy, lifting her in a gentle embrace and spinning her around the kitchen while Mrs. Winters clapped her hands in delight. "A baby," he kept repeating as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Our baby." "Due in late spring," Violet confirmed, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Just in time for the first anniversary of when you found me." The winter of 1875-1876 was harsh, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but the ranch house remained warm and filled with happiness as they prepared for their child's arrival. Hunter became even more protective of Violet, insisting she rest frequently and avoid any strenuous work. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she would remind him with a laugh, though she was touched by his concern. As Violet's body changed with the growing child, Hunter found her more beautiful than ever. Each night, he would place his hand on her expanding belly, marveling at the occasional flutter of movement from their unborn child. Spring arrived at last, bringing with it new calves, green grass, and increasing anticipation as Violet's time drew near. Doc Wilson began making regular visits to the ranch, assuring them that everything was progressing normally. On a warm day in May 1876, almost exactly a year after Hunter had carried a wounded Violet the last 10 miles to Sheridan, their son was born after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. They named him Joseph Hunter Hayes, in honor of Violet's father and his own. As Hunter held his son for the first time, looking down at the tiny face with its shock of dark hair, he felt a sense of completion he'd never imagined possible. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the baby to Violet's arms. "He is," she agreed, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. "And so is our life together." Hunter sat beside her on the bed, one arm around his wife, the other hand gently touching his son's tiny fingers. "From the moment I saw you stumble and fall that day, something changed in me," he confessed. "I'd been existing, not living, You brought me back to life." Violet leaned against him, their son nestled between them. "And you gave me a second chance at mine. Carrying me those 10 miles was just the beginning of how you've saved me." "I'd carry you 1,000 miles if I had to," Hunter said softly, kissing her temple. Outside their window, Wyoming's vast landscape stretched to the horizon, wild and beautiful. Inside, the little family that had been forged through danger and courage embraced their future together, secure in the knowledge that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginning, lead exactly where they're meant to. As little Joseph grew from infant to toddler, the Hayes Ranch prospered. Hunter and Violet worked side by side, their partnership extending from marriage to business. They became known throughout the territory for their fair dealings and quality livestock, and their home was always open to travelers and neighbors in need. By the time their son was 5, they had added a daughter to their family, Elizabeth Rose Hayes, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's steady gaze. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost before they could walk properly. Sheridan grew from a small frontier settlement to a proper town, as the railroad brought more settlers and business opportunities. Hunter served on the town council for several terms, helping to shape the community's development while maintaining its character. Violet, drawing on her Eastern education, helped establish the town's first proper school and library. She never regretted her decision to stay in Wyoming, finding fulfillment in the life she and Hunter had built together. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Hunter and Violet would often sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Sometimes, they would reminisce about their extraordinary beginning, the desperate journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" Violet asked once, her head resting on Hunter's shoulder. Hunter's arm tightened around her. "I don't have to wonder," he replied. "I was meant to find you, and I'll always be grateful that I did." In the years that followed, their love only deepened. Weathering the challenges of ranch life, raising children, and the occasional reminder of Violet's brush with death in the form of pain from her old wound during cold weather. But each challenge only strengthened their bond, a testament to the connection that had formed during those crucial 10 miles so long ago. Their story became something of a legend in Sheridan, the wounded woman and the cowboy who carried her to safety and into a life of love. And though neither Hunter nor Violet considered themselves extraordinary, those who knew them recognized the rare and beautiful thing they had found together on the wild frontier of Wyoming Territory. In the end, it wasn't just Violet's life that Hunter had saved that spring day in 1875. In carrying her those last 10 miles, he had also carried both of them toward a future brighter than either could have imagined alone, a journey that, despite its dangerous beginning, had led them exactly where they were meant to be.